What we're going to look at now is learning objectives 1 and 2 of the process, and communication models and types of business communication, and how to make effective communications. And that's the important bit, as far too many things in business go astray because of poor communications. People not getting the message at the right time, or the wrong message completely because it's gone through a number of people and they've modified probably what they thought was said. So the person at the other end gets a complete wrong story and things go adrift. So it's making sure that the company or the organisation has a strategy on how they're going to communicate and to whom they are going to communicate in that manner. So there'll be a whole range of different communications, phone calls, emails mainly, and also direct advertising communications to some. So communication models. One business communication model or a representation of the process is that you have a sender. They send a message to the receiver which decodes that message or receives it, and then feeds back that they have understood it or not understood it, as the case may be, or added more material to it so that the sender has more information. So that's a simple model of business communication, and quite often the simple models are quite often the best. So a method of presenting communication process by any figure or by any visual method is practical or visual in nature. The communicator model uses symbols or pictures to convey the message, just as I have done with that small graphic that was on before, and it's easier and comprehensible due to the manner of its presentation. And it requires less explanation, as it's presented quite clearly by the figures that are on the symbols. It's less complex due to the use of less text, and more use of pictures and symbols can explain context. It takes less time to actually prepare a communication model. It's more effective since the presenter can explain to the audience with the use of a graphical representation. So the different types of communication models we'll look at are Aristotle's model, Laswell's model, the Warren-Weaver model, and Schramm's model. There's a whole host of others, Riley's, Barlow's, and a contemporary model. So Aristotle's model is mainly focused on speaker and speech. It can be broadly divided into 5 elements: speaker, speech, the occasion, and the audience and effect. The speaker has the most important role, since it's the only one who is active, although it needn't be. As we deliver these sessions at any time, because the listener is in contact, they can actually see the presenter and ask questions as and when they need to do. So it's not quite Aristotle's model. But the role of the audience is normally passive and influenced by the speech, and this makes the communication process just one way, from speaker to receiver. According to the model, the speech must be prepared and so the audience can be persuaded or influenced just by the speech. It was highly used to develop public speaking skills and create a propaganda. Example, politician and trainer. Speaker, speech, audience, and what effect that speech has had from the speaker on the audience. Mm-hmm. So Laswell's model is about process of communication and its function to society. It suggests that the message flow is a multicultural society with multiple audiences. The model has 5 components which are used as an analysis tool for evaluating the communication process and its components. Control analysis helps the sender have all the power. Content analysis, associated with stereotyping and representation of different groups politically. Media analysis, which represents the medium that should be used to exercise maximum power against the receivers. Audience analysis shows who are the target population to be manipulated or brainwashed. This was true in the 1930s in Germany when Hitler came to power, and it was his power of speech and selective propaganda that was used mainly to drive the rise of the party. Effect analysis used to predict the effect of the message over the target population to be exploited. Now, this is what we get in, can I suggest that the media we have today, newspapers, not only newspapers but magazines and political information, is quite often used in a manner which is, if it's not exactly telling lies, it's not telling the whole truth, and therefore the effect or the intended effect is rather than the truth of what's actually happening. And that happens quite a lot in the media.
Yeah.
So who, if your community says what, the message, in which channel, the medium, to whom, about the receiver, and with what effect.
Mm-hmm.
Warren Weaver's model of linear model of communication is specially designed to develop the effective communication between sender and receiver. The model deals with various aspects like information source, transmitter, noise, channel, message, receiver, channel information destination, encode and decode. The sender encodes the message and sends it to the receiver through a technological channel like a telephone or telegraph or email or any of the methods we now use today like text, etc. The sender converts that message into codes understandable to the machine. The message is sent in codes through a particular medium. The receiver has to decode the message before understanding it and interpreting it, and then the channel can have, noise, and the receiver might not have the capacity to decode, which might cause problems in communication processes. So the information source uses a channel which may not be the correct one, and the key features is one-way communication. The senders send the message to receivers only, and they only receive. There is no feedback and no concept of what noise. So it's good for audience persuasion and intentional results, which is what I discussed before. And the against is there's no concept of feedback, and there is no way to know if the communication has been received effectively. Barlow looks at or takes into account the emotional aspect of the message. So Barlow's model of communication operates on the SMCR model. S stands for source, message stands for message, C stands for channel, and R stands for receiver. As you can see, all of these models use the same method, use the same medium in terms of you have a messenger, a message receiver, and a way of actually passing that on. The different ways in which they can actually work, it depends on the circumstance. So you can choose a model to actually deliver what you intend to deliver. The source may be one person or a group of people or part of a company, so they can have meetings by Skype and by this communication method we're using. The message obviously is the information again, and views or thoughts sent by the source, and the source must choose the language of the message. The channel is a method such as telegraph, newspaper, radio, letter, post, email, whatever mode or method that you use, as how it will be transmitted. And the receiver is the final element in the communication process. The receiver is the audience of the message. So LO's model is source, message, channel, receiver. Schramm looks at information being of no use until it can be carefully put into words and conveyed to others. Encoding plays a very important role because it initiates the process of communication by converting the thought into some sort of content. That's just like whenever you send a text, you've got to put some thought into what you're sending it for if you are initiating the text and not just responding to it. There is understanding what the speaker intends to convey. This model suggests that encoding and decoding are the two most important parts of the communication process. So Schramm's model came in a long time before there were any of the new electronic methods of communication that we have today, apart from telephone and telegraph. But the message remains the same. You've got to be able to make sure that your audience understands what the message is being sent, whether it is intentional or unintentional. Riley's model indicates the communicator who emerges as part of a larger passion, who sends messages in accordance with the expectations and actions of other people and groups within the same social structure. It's also true in the case of the receiver in the communications process, because both communicator and receiver are part of an overall social system. This model clearly illustrates that communication is now a two-way process. So primary group sends a message, primary group at the other end sends messages back, and those are received backwards and forwards, and it's part of a larger social structure. Social networking is probably the best example of that, where the messenger will send the message personally, but will be picked up by a group and probably responded to in several different ways, some positive and some less positive. In the normal regions of modern day style of communication, incorporate a communicator encoding information, moderate, recipient, decoding and suggestions along with sounds. It all remains back to the original one, which has a communicator, the message is encoded, the message is sent by a specific medium, it's received by a receiver who decodes it and then sends the message back to the communicator. So, written communication. Advantages: permanent record. Takes time to draft, ensure no errors are there, and the intent of the message is surely conveyed. It can become a legal document. Purely formal messages, hence, lacks the personal touch. This is like mail you get through the post from organisations such as your insurance company and that sort of thing. It can be sent to many people at the same time, but may not be required for all level of people who you want to speak to. It's suitable for long messages and official communications. This is why you will get group meetings within an organisation who will then pass this information on to the different levels within the organisation. And again, it lacks confidentiality as it becomes quite public after release. It provides detailed information but does not provide instant feedback. Ensure all employees are on the same page and the message is conveyed, but once released, the modification cannot be done on the same document. Verbal communications without recorded backup, time-saving, quick dissemination, they lack documentation, so it remains informal. Detailed clarifications and queries can be raised at the same time, but there can be some scope for misunderstanding. That can be rectified with further questions, of course, but then initially that doesn't always happen. It adds a personal touch to communications. That depends on who's delivering it, but not recommended for when long messages or a procedure has to be conveyed. It can be effective in certain areas such as conflict management, but it's ineffective for a widely dispersed group of audience. It's confidential as it takes place between only certain individuals, but there's, again, absence of a permanent record, unless it's a meeting and there are minutes taken, but then you've got a recorded message. Visual communication transcends in some ways barriers of language. It can be costly to produce multiple copies of such communication. It simplifies the message that has to be conveyed. It's costly to disseminate or reach out to all the intended audience. Easy to understand and interpret, but as there is no interaction between the audience and the communicator, leaves no room for feedback, there will be misunderstandings that could happen at that point. Shows trends and comparison in an effective manner. Complex ideas are difficult to convey through this medium though, and the ability to recall is high with the use of graphical images. One thing that I would say transcends that is if you get something like an algorithm. If you see a printed algorithm, I used to be an engineer many years ago, and when you were looking at troubleshooting on a piece of equipment, you would have sometimes a printed algorithm that says if this works, go to that, if that doesn't work, go to this, etc. So a graphical means of communicating is somewhat better in those circumstances. Ability to recall is higher with graphics. Takes time and thought to prepare. Does capture attention, but again, there's no interaction of the audience and the communicator, which it leaves for feedback. One of the things, though, that it does do, it makes sure that if you, using the example I gave you before, once you've gone through one of those algorithms more than a couple of times, you pick it up, you do remember it, so that you know next time if there's a conflict on what the best method to proceed is, you've got that algorithm in your head to actually fulfill that. So electronic communications are instant and easy to communicate with the intended audience. Costs can be high to maintain equipment that they use for electronic dissemination, but of course that has gone down as more and more companies, individuals are using it now. The cost of the equipment compared with 20 years ago is minimal. Keeps a record in case of emails or faxes, but it can be confidentially breached unless there is proper encryption in the methods used to actually deliver the message. Most organisations now will have an encryption series end-to-end to make sure that the messages don't go astray. If you use WhatsApp or any of those type of message centres, all their work is encrypted now, so that there can be no, or the chance for confidentiality breach has been reduced. A large amount of information can be conveyed with the help of emails. Not everyone may have access to electronic modes of communication, and again, that now is reduced greatly because one mobile phone, certainly a contemporary one of today, has now far more power in it than the computers that sent men to the moon in 1969. So that more or less everyone now has access to electronic modes of communication. Certainly, if you don't have a lot of data, there are now hotspots all over the place where you can catch into Wi-Fi. I'll grant you that is not as secure, but the access is greatly improved. Good for speed to send transmission, and users need internet connection every time. But like I've said, that the connection to the internet, if you have data on your equipment, then there isn't a problem, because obviously you can connect at any time. But if there is you're in a Wi-Fi hotspot or in an area where you can pick up a signal, then that's not a problem. And it allows for easy management of the communication, because considering email, you can send email, you can actually send attachments with it that can actually replace graphics by giving more information in a graphical sense, if you like, as an attachment, rather than you know, just sending the actual printed email. Formal and informal communications. Formal communication can increase overall efficiency. It's an easy communication system. You can improve interpersonal relationships when using informal communications. What a lot of companies have done nowadays, they've put a customer relationship management system into the process, so that the less personal aspect of dealing with other companies or people within those companies is removed, and it's done on a much more personal level now between an account manager and some of the accounts that he may have with other companies. It provides an alternate mechanism for interaction with colleagues within an organisation. It's a permanent record, of course, again. Complex and uncomfortable things can be conveyed, as we have found with, again, I'll refer to social media. People will say things on social media that they wouldn't possibly dream of saying to someone's face. I think the term is armchair warriors, but that is very apparent in this case. So uncomfortable things can be said when it's not face to face. It provides a disciplined approach to communication, but provides the flexibility of communicating at the same time. It's an ease of delegation of authority. Employees can approach their colleagues and the bosses with a grievance, whether it be dealt with is a different matter, but there are multiple modes available, and it's a free flow of information backwards and forwards. So making it effective. Again, it's the 7 C's, starting with completeness, concreteness, courtesy, correctness, clarity, consideration, and conciseness. So clarity, it implies emphasising on a specific message or goal at a time, rather than trying to achieve too much at once. It's like the old adage on PowerPoints. You should have so many words per line and so many lines per page or per slide, otherwise you confuse the audience. That used to be the case, but not today, when people are more used to actually using that method or mode of communication. A clear message makes use of extract, appropriate and concrete words. Communication must be complete. It should convey all the facts that are required by the specific audience. The sender of the message must take into consideration the receiver's mindset and convey the message accordingly. So if you are speaking to an irate person for some reason on the other end, then you use a different language than you would if you were sending it the other way around, where you were not very pleased about something and you weren't particularly interested in how it was received. So it's got to be complete. Conciseness means communicating what has to be conveyed in as least possible words without losing other parts of the C's of communication. It's a necessity for effective communication. Some people will pick up, I'll give you an instance on, I've worked with employers who shortlist people for interview, and they've picked up a CV that's been two sides of one sheet. They've read through it and put it, yes, a possibility. They've picked up another CV and it's been about 4 pages, and they've read the first page and then put it in the bin. So that's obviously the communication method was wrong. I'm not saying the employer was right in doing that. He could be throwing the best person for the job into the bin, but it doesn't meet with his requirements or best use of his time. So effective consideration must take the audience into consideration, their viewpoints, their background, their mindset, educational levels. Words and message should be modified to suit an audience's needs while making it. An example I will give you of that is that many years ago I was asked to write some units for engineering, because I used to be an engineer, for mechanics engineering, and we wrote the units and then they were sent off to be printed up by some academic somewhere. When we got them back again, we recognised the language that was used. We were mainly dealing with young people who had left school at 16 and got a job or an apprenticeship and were working through their apprenticeship programme. And quite honestly, some of the words that were used in the units, they would not understand. So there was pointless putting those forwards, and it was only when the Plain English Society got involved that they were rewritten in a language that would suit the audience. Concrete communication implies it being clear rather than fuzzy and general. Concrete messages are not misinterpreted. In other words, you use words that are clear and that build the reputation. Courtesy in message implies that the message should show the consender's expression as well as it should show respect to the receiver. In all normal terms, politeness costs nothing, or courtesy costs nothing. An old Lancashire saying, which is where I come from, is that you will kill more flies with sugar than you will with vinegar, which is exactly what this is saying. The sender of the message should be sincere and polite and judicious, reflective and enthusiastic. Yeah? Correctness in communication implies there are no grammatical errors in the communication, so correct messages a greater impact on audiences or readers. And again, that depends on the reader. If the reader's level of English is not more than average, then that is less important. If it is something being written in academic English, then yes, you would expect it to be grammatically correct, as well as simple spellings and things like that. So there are a whole host of barriers to communication, or effective communication. Language, noise, that's background noise, distractions, put downs, people actually saying things that really weren't necessary, lack of interest, somebody not really interested in listening to what's got to be said. Some people with a disability may have a hearing or sight impairment that makes them receiving messages more difficult. Discomfort, not being in a place to actually receive the message. Distance sometimes can not improve things. Too many questions being asked backwards and forwards. Other people involved and the time it takes to actually deliver the message. So we'll go through those one at a time. Language. Employees may belong to different countries and speak different languages in a multinational organisation. Now, in terms of business, English is still the major language spoken, but also more growingly, Chinese is getting in there as well because of the number of people that actually speak that language. But in terms of a multinational corporation where they hadn't got English speakers at the other end, then they would need to make sure that they had arrangements in place to translate that message to the people.
Mm-hmm.
Employers in a marketing department asking too many questions regarding the product or the launch, or not showing confidence in the strategy of the organisation. If the strategy had been messaged correctly, then the questions would reduce. Distance. Employees who are placed far off from their base locations show less inclination towards organisational activities. This is becoming more and more prevalent in terms of people working from home. Sometimes they're not available for a webinar or something to come across, or they've done it on the phone and if the connection's not been good, and they are less inclined to look at organisational activities when they are basically on their own. Lack of interest. Employees who do not participate in training exercises and are satisfied with their existing skill sets. That occurs on a regular basis because of the way the training exercises are displayed in such a way as they're going, oh no, not that again. Distractions, noise, rumours, continuous phone calls, or in the middle of meetings, or meetings that are being held in an office when people are trying to work. A person with a disability with their leg will not be able to participate in all the activities for an organisation if they've got to walk about and do things that require physical activity. Employers are too busy with their daily activities not to find time for creative and innovative solutions. Yeah, I said that one. Employees too confident about the future of the organisation due to external rumours. So that's the end of the presentation, and it will cover some of the things towards the first learning objectives. So we'll look at the level 4, and you can read through this, and I will leave this to yourself. As this is the sample assignment, having understood all the information required, this is a scenario for you to use as an assignment. And ATHE certainly make sure that the all the units have an assignment for you to do. Now, what you've got to make sure is that they don't always offer 1.2, 1.2, 1.3. It may be 1.1 and 1.2 and then 3.1 and 3.2 in the same assignment. That doesn't matter. If you follow the assignment, what's it asking you to do, then you will fulfill the assessment criteria. So don't worry about that. Just follow the assignment. So you've got to prepare a formal report for senior staff in line with managers at SHDE. You will need to use charts and graphs to present information as appropriate to convey quantitative data. So you have to produce a presentation, yeah? An analysis of the process of communication within organisations. So that's some of the stuff we've covered today. You can use that as the basis for your analysis and the barriers that exist. An assessment of the methods of internal communication that should be used for different purposes. Again, as we mentioned before, letters, telephones, etc., etc. But please support this with assessment of what other organisations do and examples of what could apply to SHDE. An assessment of how organisations portray themselves through their communication. What does SHDE Holdings currently have? Given an assessment of other organisations and the images they portray through their communications. If you want to go to a merit, you must provide guidance for SHDE using the examples of best practice from other organisations. But make sure you analyse possible legal and ethical issues in relation to the communication of information within organisations, and evaluate the effectiveness of a range of communication, verbal and non-verbal, in contributing to the success of an organisation. That's 1M1 and 3M1. We're not going to go past that at this stage because task 1 is quite important that you get under your belt. If we go down, and this information is available to you on the VLE, so don't worry about that. You'll be able to access all this. If we go through to the end of there will be, it tells you all about the company. It's an electrical supplier with regional repair centres. It's currently experiencing operational problems that are affecting customer satisfaction. Many of these are outside the scope of this report. Training Solutions have been asked to focus on communication issues both within the company and with their suppliers and customers. It gives you a bit more history of what's been happening. 2 solutions have been proposed. Training session and a report to inform on the influence of SMT and line managers. So it says on 15th of June, a consultant spent days there, and the following research activities were carried out: a desk review of the customer complaints, desk review of the policies and procedures, interviews of 10 staff, including the managing director and operations manager, 2 shop floor staff, 2 delivery staff and the HR manager, 1 payroll assistant and the receptionist of the premises manager. The findings are then listed underneath here, and that will be the basis of how you perform your report. Yeah?
Yeah.
So this bit at the bottom here is the most useful piece to read, because you need to get the background before you start. Again, other issues were found that there are no formal communication policies and procedures, no protocol of answering the phone, complaints are often not acknowledged, there's no standard protocol for internal communication. The company Facebook page was recently used to inform customers of product changes. Suppliers are not dealt with consistently. There is no monitoring process for external communications, and communications between line managers and staff is completely random. There appears to be no regular meetings to disseminate and gather information, and the SMT do not meet regularly. So there is a whole host of things for you to inform what's going wrong and what needs to be done to put it right. Yeah. So again, read through those conclusions. Guidelines for assessors to what you need to do is suggested evidence, and this is for you really, yeah. And again, right through to the end. But as I said, we're only going to look at the first stage this week. And if you can put some material together with the guidance here and the information you received on the assignment, and send that through to learner work at ukversity.co.uk. That will find its way to me, and certainly within a few days I will be able to give you some feedback on the work that you've sent, and then we can move on to the next stage. Is that okay?
Okay.
How have you found the session up to now? Has it been confusing, enlightening, or useful? Has that been okay for you?
Yeah.
Sorry? Has the sound been okay? I'm not getting a clear sound off yourself. I'm just wondering if you've got an issue with the sound. No? There's also further reading on another page on the VLE, and that lets you look at different subjects within email. If you want to learn more about email, and it tells you which pages those are on, you can go straight to them here and have a look at those. And again, this information is on the VLE for you to use. This is obviously the unit aims and objectives, and it says what you need to look at. And the first three are, we covered some of three, but most of 1 and 2 today, so you can look at those. This information, what it's asking you to do here, is not necessarily useful to you in terms of it's just saying what it covers, but the assignment that you do will cover these assessment criteria. Yeah, you don't have to follow these. These will be followed if you follow the assignment in the back. Okay. Can I confirm that you have access to the VLE? Hello? We seem to have lost contact. At what point, I'm not sure, but I think it was only a few moments ago. What I would suggest is that a copy of this session is sent to you by email, and therefore you'll be able to follow that through as you work towards the parts of learning objectives 1 and 2. With that, I'll close the meeting at this point, and again, thank you for attending.